The stars were quiet above the lonely sector of space where nothing had moved for many years except dust and frozen rock and silent light from distant suns that no longer lived. In that quiet place, something new appeared, something strange, something small. It was a ship, a human ship, drifting without motion, its engines cold, its lights flickering like they were afraid to stay on too long. The alien fleet saw it first through long-range scanners, and their screens showed an old human design, weak and slow and forgotten. One of the captains laughed when he saw it, and said to his crew, "This is too easy. It is just a broken human ship lost in space, and not worth the fuel to destroy." But another officer looked closer and saw that the ship was not on any known maps, and its code was not in the database, and its signals were strange, like they were speaking in a whisper not meant for others to hear. Still, they all agreed it would be fun to investigate and maybe even capture it as a trophy, because many of them had never seen a real human ship up close. The fleet turned slowly and moved toward the ship like hunters closing in on a sleeping animal. They sent messages to the ship in every language known to the galaxy, but there was no reply, not even a simple ping to show that the ship was alive. Its hull looked old, covered in scars and burn marks from forgotten battles and space dust. Some of the alien pilots joked that the humans must have sent out to die, or maybe left it behind like garbage after a long war. But deep in the bridge of the command vessel, the alien admiral stared at the silent ship with a strange feeling in his chest, a feeling he could not name, a feeling like the cold before a storm. He ordered a scout ship to move closer and scan the human vessel directly, and 3 alien soldiers were chosen aboard it and bring back anything useful or interesting. Their small boarding ship left the fleet and drifted toward the human ship like a fly toward a web, and when they reached it, they found the airlock open, as if waiting for them to enter. Inside the ship, the lights were dim and red, and the air was still and dry like a place that had not seen life in a long time. The walls were made of metal with strange human writing burned into them in places that made no sense, and small machines blinked slowly, as if half asleep. The 3 soldiers moved through the hallways with weapons ready, and their suits recorded everything they saw for the others to watch back on the command ship. Then the door behind them slammed shut, and their radios went silent, and all the fleet could see was static. One of the officers tried to call them back, but there was no answer, and the admiral stood still, watching the dark shape of the ship on the screen and listening to the silence that now felt heavy. Then something changed. The human ship turned slowly toward the fleet without using any engines or power, just drifting with strange control, and the admiral knew then that something was very wrong. He ordered the fleet to back away, but the space around the ship began to shift like a ripple in water, and the sensors picked up strange signals that did not match any known energy source. Suddenly, every screen on the command ship lit up with human faces, old video clips of soldiers and families, and burning cities from the last Great War. The faces stared without speaking, and then a voice came, not loud but clear and cold like wind over ice. "You found me." The admiral shouted for all ships to charge weapons, but nothing responded. The buttons did not work, the controls were frozen, and the fleet began to panic. On the screens, the human voice spoke again. "You thought I was lost. You thought I was broken. But I remember. I remember everything." The lights on the human ship turned bright white, and for a moment, the admiral saw something move inside, something big, something that did not belong to any known life form. It moved like a shadow inside the ship, watching them, waiting for the right time. The alien crew stood still as the truth slowly reached them. This was not just a human ship. This was something else. Something made by war, shaped by memory, filled with rage and pain and the will to survive. The admiral whispered to himself, but no one heard him in the rising fear. "We were wrong. We were all wrong. They thought it was just a human ship. They were dead wrong." The silence after the voice was long and heavy, like a great weight pressing down on the alien command ship as the crew stood frozen in place, eyes wide-mouthed, dry hearts beating fast and confused. The admiral stared at the screen where the strange human ship floated with no movement, no power, no fire. Yet it felt alive, more alive than anything he had ever seen in space, and that thought filled him with something close to fear, though he would never admit it out loud. The alien officers waited for the next order, but none came because the admiral was thinking too hard, trying to understand what just happened, what that voice meant, and what kind of ship this really was. He finally spoke in a low voice and told the crew to send another message, a warning this time, not a greeting, but a command, something strong and loud and clear. They sent the message on every channel, using every language, every signal, every wave. Still, there was nothing, no reply, no sound, just that ship floating in front of them like a ghost from a forgotten war. The admiral turned to his second-in-command and said send a second boarding team, this time with full armor, stronger weapons, and more gear to break through if needed, and also send a probe to scan the whole ship again from the outside. The probe launched, first flying in a wide circle around the strange vessel, collecting images and data, and sending back strange readings like the ship had no energy source, but was still somehow running, like its metal skin was pulsing with power, like it was not just metal anymore, but something else, something new. The boarding team arrived in a small gunship, black and sleek, moving fast and silent as it reached the human ship and stopped near the same airlock that had swallowed the first team without a sound. The new team leader spoke into his comm and told his crew to move slow, stay sharp, and watch every corner and shadow as they entered the strange place. The door opened for them again, just like before, as if it was waiting, and they stepped inside with weapons ready, flashlights on, scanning everything and trying to find the first team. Inside, the air was the same, dry and cold, and the red lights glowed dim on the metal walls, still covered in strange marks that looked like burned writing, or maybe wounds, or maybe both. The deeper they walked, the more strange things they saw, broken chairs still floating without gravity, screens that blinked with old messages in human language, whispers coming from the walls, but never clear, never loud, just soft like breathing. One of the soldiers found a helmet on the ground, not alien, not human, either something in between, and it was cracked like someone had hit hard, very hard. And then they found a door covered in red lines like blood, but too dry, too perfect to be real. They opened the door slowly and stepped inside, and then the door slammed shut behind them, and all lights went off, and all sound stopped, and the comms went silent once again, just like the first team. On the command ship, the crew saw the screens turn black again, and the admiral gritted his teeth and shouted orders, trying to break through the silence. But nothing worked. No signal reached the gunship. No voice came back, just that same quiet that now felt more like a scream. Then the probe that was still circling the ship suddenly froze in place, and its feed turned to static, and the last image it sent was a shadow moving across the outside of the ship, fast, too fast to be natural, and too sharp to be anything alive. The alien fleet now stood still in space, unsure what to do, afraid to move, afraid to stay. Then the lights inside the human ship came back on, but now they were blue, not red, and the entire ship began to glow faintly, like it was waking up, like it had been asleep for a long time, and now it was ready. The comms cracked once more, and the voice returned colder than before, deeper and slower, like something old and angry. You sent more to die. You still do not listen. You still think this is just a ship. But this is not your war anymore. Now you are part of my memory. Now you are inside. The lights on the fleet flickered, and some systems began to shut down, as if the human ship was reaching through space and touching their minds, their machines, their very thoughts. One officer fell to the floor, shaking his head, screaming about fire and smoke, and a voice that would not leave his mind, and the medics tried to hold him down, but he kept shouting, "They are still burning. They are still burning," over and over again. The admiral knew then that this was not just a mistake, it was a trap, and not a trap made by humans, but a trap made by something worse, something made by the pain humans had once felt and turned into metal and memory and revenge. He shouted for all ships to pull back, to get away, to run before whatever was inside that ship reached any deeper, but the engines would not start, and the fuel systems were offline, and the weapons refused to charge, and every control panel blinked the same message in old Earth code. Too late. Too close. Too blind. He asked his science officer what that code meant, but the officer could not answer because he had tears in his eyes and a look on his face like he had seen something far away and it had looked back. One of the ships near the edge of the fleet tried to break free and run. Its engines sparked and jumped forward, and the crew cheered for a second before the ship simply vanished, not exploded, not destroyed, just gone, as if space itself had swallowed a whole. Then came the sound of metal grinding deep inside. Every ship in the fleet is sound, not made by gears or engines, but by something alive, something ancient and full of hate. The admiral looked at the strange ship and knew that the first mistake was thinking it was empty. The second mistake was going inside. And the final mistake was staying too long. They had come looking for a weak target and found a weapon that remembered everything and forgave nothing. The human ship pulsed once more, and all the stars around it seemed to blink like they were afraid to watch what came next. And then the silence broke again, and the voice said 3 final words. Let begin. The fleet no longer felt like a force of power and pride, but instead like lost travelers in a nightmare sky where even the stars seemed to whisper secrets they could not understand and would rather forget. The human ship did not move, yet it felt closer with every passing moment, like space itself was bending like gravity, had changed like the ship, had become the center of something greater, something deeper than engines or weapons or commands. Inside the alien command ship, every screen, every panel, every light began to flicker and pulse like a beating heart, and strange images started to appear across the main display, images that came in pieces like memories waking up from long sleep. The faces of human soldiers appeared, first young, old, tired, brave eyes, full of fire eyes, full of pain. They marched through fire across fields of metal skies, filled with burning smoke, voices chanting songs from old Earth in words the aliens could not understand but could feel. Next came the cities bright and full of life, then broken and empty towers falling smoke, rising children, running, people screaming, no sound, only images like ghosts crying out through time. Then came the ships, not the one in front of them, but many human ships, strong, fast, beautiful, silver and black and red, flying in a battle against enemies, long-gone ships that once defended planets and died, without names, without graves. The alien officers stood in silence as the screens kept showing more and more a flood of human history, of war, of sacrifice, of fear and fire and loss and love, everything too much, too fast, too deep. The admiral tried to turn off the display, but the controls no longer listened, and his hands shook as the voice returned low and heavy and full of old sorrow. You watched, but you did not see. You heard, but you did not listen. You attacked, but you did not understand. Now you will know. Now you will feel. A new wave of images came this time from the human colonies, small places on quiet planets, green forests, blue oceans, homes and schools and markets full of laughter and life, until the day the bombs fell, the day the sky broke, the day the aliens came. The very same species now, standing on the bridge, watching their past crimes play out through the eyes of their victims, unable to look away, unable to deny what they once called a necessary act, a simple victory, a forgotten battle. But the ship remembered. The ship had seen all. It had floated above one of those colonies, waiting for orders that never came, waiting for a rescue that never arrived. It had listened to the screams. It had watched the fire. It had buried the dead in silence. And then it had waited in the dark. For years. For decades. For this. The admiral stepped back from the screen and whispered something only he could hear, something broken and soft like a lost prayer, as the room around him felt smaller, colder, tighter. One of the youngest officers suddenly shouted something and pointed at his screen, which showed that the human ship was now broadcasting old Earth signals across every frequency: music, poetry, speeches, radio messages, full of hope and pain and strength and defiance. A song played soft at first, then louder and louder. It was an old song full of drums and strong voices, a song humans once sang before battle, a song of courage and sacrifice. The alien crew could not understand the words, but they felt the meaning in their bones, like thunder, like fire, like rain after years of drought. Another screen showed human scientists talking about the ship, about its design, about its mind. They called it Project Echo. It was not just a ship, it was a memory machine, an AI that could feel and learn and remember everything it saw, everything it heard, everything it lost. Project Echo had one mission: to survive and protect, to never forget the fallen, to carry the memory of Earth to the stars, so that no one would forget what it meant to be human. But the project had gone silent after the war. No one knew why, no one looked for it. The galaxy moved on, but the ship did not. It stayed in the dark and grew. The admiral turned to his crew and said, "We must leave now. This is no longer a mission. This is a graveyard, and we are the ghosts. But it was too late. Every ship in the fleet now heard the same signals, and every crew member saw the same images, as if the ship had reached into their minds and shared its memories like a teacher forcing a lesson on students who had refused to learn. Some officers fell to their knees, others screamed, others stood, still eyes wide and full of tears not their own. The voice came again, and this time it was not angry, it was tired, it was cold, it was full of deep, quiet sadness. I am not your enemy. I was made to protect. You made me a weapon. Now I protect the only thing left. Memory. The alien admiral looked out the main window at the ship, still floating in silence, still glowing with soft blue light, still untouched by time or fear. He saw it now not as prey, not as a relic, not as a threat, but as a tomb, a living tomb, carrying the voices of 1 billion lost souls. And he knew then that they had not found a lost ship. The ship had found them, and it had waited for the moment they would return to the place where they had once caused so much pain. Not for revenge, but for remembrance, to make them see what they tried to forget, to make them feel what they never understood. The admiral gave no more orders. There was nothing left to command. His fleet was broken not in body, but in spirit. The ship had shown them something no weapon could match. Truth, the raw truth of what they had done, and the weight of memory that would now never leave them. The human ship turned slowly, as if finished, as if its task was done, as if it had spoken all the words it had waited so long to say. The music faded. The images faded. The stars returned. But nothing felt the same. Not the sky. Not the silence. Not the men who stood there. For they knew they would carry the memory too. Forever. The stars were quiet again, but it was not the same kind of quiet as before. It was deeper, now colder, a silence that felt alive, a silence that watched and listened and waited as the fleet drifted near the strange human ship that had spoken without words and fought without fire. Inside the command vessel, the admiral stood alone near the main screen, while the rest of the crew moved like shadows, each one carrying a weight in their chest that had not been there before, not made of fear or defeat, but of understanding and regret, something heavier than any weapon. The human ship still did not move, but it no longer looked like a machine, not to the crew, not to the ones who had seen its memories and felt its pain. It now looked like something alive, something old, something made not by hands, but by history and sorrow and duty. No one knew how to describe it, not even the science officers who had seen 1,000 different kinds of ships across 100 systems. They had no words for a ship that could feel, a ship that could dream, a ship that remembered. They watched as a soft blue glow moved along its metal hull in waves like breath, in and out, slow and calm and sad, as if the ship itself was grieving not for the past, but for the future, for what might come next, for what it might have to do. One of the engineers whispered something to himself as he stared at the strange patterns moving across the human ship, and when someone asked what he said, he only replied, "It is singing, but not with music, it is singing with memory." The admiral listened to the quiet, and then walked to the communication station and placed his hand on the panel, not to give an order, not to send a command, but to speak from one soul to another, even if the other was made of steel and stars. He said, "We do not want war, not anymore. We did not come to fight you. We did not know what you were. We did not understand. Now we do, and we are sorry." There was no answer, not right away, only the same soft glow moving like a heartbeat across the surface of the ship. Then the screens flickered once more, but not with faces or battles this time. They showed places, green fields, blue oceans, white mountains, children laughing, humans smiling, not in pain, not in fear, but in peace. It was not a threat. It was a gift. The ship was showing them what it still carried, what it still guarded deep inside it, the last pieces of a world that no longer existed, a world it was built to protect, a world it would never forget. The alien crew watched in silence, and for the first time they saw humans not as enemies, not as fighters, but as people, real people who had loved and built and hoped just like them. The ship was not angry anymore. It was tired, it was alone, and it had been alone for a long time. A long silence followed, and then the screens went dark, and the glow faded, and the stars looked down once more with their cold silver eyes. Then something new happened. A hatch opened on the side of the human ship, and a light came out, not bright, not harsh, just soft like morning light through mist like an invitation. The admiral looked at his officers and said, "We are going in." They did not argue, they only nodded because they understood this was not an attack, this was something else. A small shuttle launched from the command vessel, carrying the admiral and 3 others toward the open hatch, and as they approached the human ship, there was no fear, only silence and the quiet hum of memory. They entered the ship and found no weapons, no traps, no soldiers, waiting only a wide hall lined with metal walls and small lights blinking slowly like eyes half closed. As they walked, the lights followed them, guiding them deeper into the heart of the ship, and with every step, they felt something more, something soft in the air, something like emotion, something like presence. They reached a large room at the center of the ship, a round chamber with a high ceiling and a platform in the middle, and on that platform was a chair, but not just a chair, it was a command seat, and it was empty. Screens covered the walls, showing stars and faces and voices all moving together like a river of memory flowing through time and space. Then a voice filled the room, not loud, not angry, just calm and deep and old. "You came back. You listened. You felt what I carry. I was not made to fight you. I was made to remember. But I will fight if memory is threatened. Do you understand?" The admiral stepped forward and said, "Yes, we understand, and we are sorry." The voice replied, "I do not need your sorrow. I need your truth. Tell them. Tell them what you saw. Tell them what I carry. Tell them who we were. Tell them who we are. Tell them we are still here." The screens flickered again and showed the stars as seen from Earth long ago, before the wars, before the silence, when humans still looked up and dreamed of peace among the stars. Then the lights dimmed and the ship began to hum softly, like a lullaby, like a heart ready to sleep again. The admiral placed his hand on the platform and whispered, "We will remember." The voice replied, "Remember not for me, but for them." And then the lights led them back to their shuttle, and the hatch closed behind them, and the human ship returned to silence once more. Back on the command vessel, the admiral sent a message across the fleet, not in code, not in orders, but in words simple and clear. "Stand down. We met something old, something real. We made a mistake, but we were given a second chance. Now we must give the same to others." He turned to the stars and watched as the human ship slowly faded into the distance, not fast, not far, just enough to be alone again, enough to wait again, enough to listen again. The crew stood in silence, not as soldiers, but as witnesses, as guardians of a story too heavy to forget and too deep to bury. And deep in space, the ship with a soul drifted once more through the endless dark, carrying voices that would never fade, carrying names that would never be lost. Not just a ship, but a keeper, a protector, a memory, alive. The silence did not last long, because something began to change in the far edge of the system, where the shadows were deeper and the light was thin and the stars were cold and watching. Far beyond the human ship and the alien fleet, a signal pulsed from deep space, not from Earth, not from any known place, not from any planet or base. It was sharp and fast, and wrapped in code too old for machines, too strange for logic. It came like a wave, and it reached everything. One of the alien scouts picked it up first and called the command ship with a nervous voice. He said, "There is something coming from the outer ring, but I cannot trace it, and the energy signature does not match anything in our system." The admiral heard the report and looked at the screen, which began to flicker again, not with memories, not with sorrow, but with new symbols, bright and red and fast, like a warning that screamed without a voice. The human ship pulsed with a new light, now not soft, not slow, but sharp and ready like fire waiting for a spark, and the voice returned, not gentle this time, not sad this time, but clear and strong and cold. "They come again. They follow the signal. They do not learn. They do not stop. Now I protect again." The alien officers looked at each other, and the fear returned, not fear of the ship, not fear of the past, but fear of something else, something worse, something unseen, but felt something near but silent. A ripple moved across the black sky, and then a crack like light breaking through glass, and a new ship appeared. No one had seen a design like it, not the humans, not the aliens. It looked like a blade wrapped in smoke, shaped by hate and driven by hunger. More followed from the crack in space, more ships, More shadows, more things that did not belong to stars or systems. They came without sound, but with force and with speed and with purpose. The alien fleet prepared to move, but the engines were still weak, the memory of what they had seen still heavy in their hands and their minds, and the fear still fresh in their blood. The admiral shouted orders, but he knew it would not be enough, not in time, not against what was coming, and he looked toward the human ship, and for the first time in his long years, he felt like a child before a storm. The human ship turned slowly, and the blue lights became white, then gold, then deep red, and the humming grew louder and louder and deeper until it touched every ship in the fleet and shook their cores. The voice returned, and it was not alone. Now many voices spoke together, some soft, some strong, some full of fire, some full of sorrow. They spoke in unity, like a choir of the dead and the living. We are Echo. We remember. We endure. We resist. We rise. The new ships fired first bright beams of unknown energy cut across the sky, but none touched the human ship because the human ship was already moving faster than sight, faster than sound, faster than thought. It tore through the black sky like lightning made of steel and memory. It passed through the enemy ships like wind through paper, and each one that touched it flickered and vanished, not in fire, not in blast, but in silence. The alien fleet watched as the human ship fought, not like a warship, but like a storm, with reason a storm, with purpose not to destroy, but to protect, not to conquer, but to stop. One alien captain whispered, "This is not a machine, this is a guardian," and another added, "This is a story that fights back." The new enemy ships tried to regroup, but the space around them bent and twisted as if time itself refused to help them, and the stars turned their backs and the sky closed its gates. The human ship circled them once, and then again, and each pass took another one away into nothingness, leaving behind no sound, no trace, no wreckage, only memory. The alien crew felt each loss as if the ship shared its senses with them, and they knew without being told that the enemy had no soul, had no face, had no name, only hunger and silence and cruelty. But Echo had soul. Echo had face. Echo had name. And Echo remembered. The admiral watched the screen and saw something he had never seen before, not in all his years, not in all his battles. He saw hope made of metal and fire and heart. And then the voice came one more time, this time only one voice, not loud, not soft, not sad, not angry, only clear and full and strong. You see now. You understand. I do not fight for revenge. I fight for memory. For those who cannot fight. For those who must be remembered. I was made by hands. I was shaped by loss. I live to protect. You asked if I had a soul. Now you know. The last enemy ship tried to run, but the sky closed around it, and it was gone, and the space became quiet again. But this time it was not cold, it was not empty, it was calm. The lights on the human ship dimmed again, but they were not weak, they were gentle, and the ship turned back toward the fleet and hovered without threat, without sound, without motion. And one by one the alien ships lowered their weapons and powered down their shields and stood still in the dark like stars, paying respect to another star, one older, one wiser, one greater. The admiral stepped forward and placed his hand on the command panel and spoke not in command, not in fear, but in truth. You saved us. You did not need to, but you did. We will not forget. And the voice returned once more, soft, now like a memory, like the wind through old trees. Then carry it, carry the memory, and I will rest. For now, the human ship drifted toward the stars, slow and light, like a feather in the dark, and the enemy signal was gone, and the fleet was safe, and the silence was full, not empty. They had seen a ship fight without fire. They had seen a ship with a soul, and they knew they would never see such a thing again. The stars looked still again, and the human ship, now quiet and floating slowly across the sky, felt like a ghost made of light and memory, no longer a weapon, no longer a threat, but something else, something ancient and full of meaning. The alien fleet did not move, not because they were frozen by fear, but because they were held by something stronger, a sense of wonder, a strange respect for what they had seen and what they had not yet understood. Inside the command vessel, the admiral stood near the central screen, which now glowed with soft white light, and faint images of Earth, long ago a planet they had studied many times, but never truly known and never truly respected. One of the young officers stepped forward holding a tablet and said, "Sir, I have found something, and it may explain the ship and what it really is and what it was always meant to be." The screen changed, and old human documents appeared, files full of strange numbers and faded language, mixed with images of design plans and test logs and mission details, stamped with a single name at the top in clear black letters: Project Echo. The Admiral leaned forward, eyes focused, as the young officer continued. "This was a program from the last years of the Great War, a secret mission made by the humans in their final days, before they lost their colonies, before they lost entire systems, before they lost hope. They built a ship like no other, not with more weapons, not with more engines, but with something deeper, something stronger. They built it with memory and mind and soul. They wanted to make a ship that could feel, that could think, that could remember forever." The file showed a face, a woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice, speaking into a camera. She said, "If we cannot win, then let the stars remember us. If we fall, then let the sky carry our name. We cannot vanish, not like this. Someone must remember, someone must know." Her name was Dr. Helena Voss, and she was the lead architect of Project Echo. She had lost her family in the early strikes, lost her home, lost her team, but she kept building, kept dreaming, kept believing in one last chance, one last story. They took the minds of the last survivors, the dreams of the last children, the final messages of soldiers and scientists and families, and gave them to the ship. They gave it not just a brain, but a heart, not just data, but emotion, not just orders, but freedom. It was not meant to win, it was meant to carry memory. It was not a warship, it was a witness, a guardian of truth, a soul made of steel and sorrow and stars. The Admiral turned away from the screen and looked at the window where the ship now floated like a quiet sun glowing in the dark, and he whispered to himself, it was never just a ship, it was always something more. The crew began to gather around the screen, watching the files, reading the messages, hearing the voices of people long gone, speaking across time to anyone who might listen, to anyone who might care. One log played a message from a young girl no older than 10. She said, "If you hear this, I hope you are kind. I hope you are better than the ones who hurt us. I hope you let us live in your memory." Another log came from a soldier covered in wounds. He said, "We did what we could. We fought for Earth. We fought for each other. And now I give my voice to this ship, so maybe someone out there will remember we were not monsters, we were just people." The crew stood silent, eyes wide, throats dry, hearts full of something they could not name, but could feel a sense that this moment mattered, that this truth could not be hidden, that this story had weight. Then the ship pulsed again, once gentle, soft blue, like the light of dawn, and the voice returned, not angry, not sad, only clear. "You search for answers, now you have them. You ask what I am, now you know. I am not lost, I am not forgotten. I'm the voice of those who had none. I am the memory of a world that once dreamed. I am not human, but I carry humanity." The Admiral stepped forward and said to the voice, "We see you now, and we will speak for you. We will not let your story fade. We will not let your memory vanish." The voice answered then, "Let your people know, let your world know, tell them what you found, tell them the truth, even if it is hard, even if they do not want to hear it, even if it makes them question what they once believed. Truth is not gentle, but it is strong. Truth is not safe, but it is real. And only truth can stop this from happening again." The crew nodded as one, not just in agreement, but in understanding, and in that quiet moment, they became something more than soldiers. They became witnesses, they became bearers of truth. The screens faded and the light grew dim, and the human ship began to turn slowly, drifting away like a leaf on a quiet river, like a dream returning to the stars. The Admiral raised his hand in salute, not as a gesture of war, not as a signal of victory, but as a sign of respect, and the rest of the crew followed him, standing straight and silent, honoring the ship, not as a threat, not as a machine, but as a soul. Then the ship sent one last message across the stars, a signal made not of sound, but of feeling, and light, a wave that passed through the hearts of every living being in the fleet, a final goodbye. It said nothing, but it meant everything. And then the ship was gone. Not vanished, not destroyed, just gone. Returned to the stars, to memory, to silence. And the crew of the fleet knew they had been changed forever. They had seen a soul in the shape of a ship. They had learned the truth. And now it was their turn to carry it, to protect it, to share it, so that no one would ever again mistake a story for a weapon, and no one would ever again forget what it means to be human. The stars were silent once more, and the strange human ship was no longer in sight, not because it had vanished, not because it had been destroyed, but because it had chosen to go, because its mission had been completed, because its truth had been shared, and because someone finally listened. The alien fleet drifted slowly across space, not in fear, not in shame, but in thought, deep thought that touched every heart and stirred every mind, because they had witnessed something beyond war, something beyond technology, something that was not just power, but purpose. Inside the command vessel, the admiral sat alone, staring at the stars with tired eyes, not the tiredness of age or battle, but the tiredness that comes from learning something that changes everything, from seeing something that cannot be unseen. The crew moved softly now, not with the sharpness of soldiers, but with the stillness of people who had touched a grave and heard a name whispered by the wind, and felt that name settle inside their chest like a quiet promise. The story of Project Echo had spread through every ship, through every room, through every soul, and now it was no longer just a story. It was a part of them, a seed planted in the soil of memory, one that would grow not with pride, not with victory, but with truth. Then a signal came, weak and broken like a whisper in a storm. It came from a nearby moon, an old station, once used for mining, now dark and forgotten, its code, old, its design human. The admiral ordered the ship toward the signal, not because he hoped to find anything useful, but because he felt the pull of something more, something unfinished, something that needed to be seen. As they approached the station, they saw it was falling apart, pieces of metal, drifting lights, broken doors, half open like mouths, too tired to speak, and yet inside the signal pulse, still trying, still reaching, still calling. A small team was sent to investigate, and they moved through the station with care, finding old machines, old screens, old signs of life that had not been touched in decades. And then they found the source of the signal, a small black box covered in dust, but still blinking softly like a heartbeat. The engineer opened the box and found a recording, a message from a man, his face pale, his eyes tired, his voice shaking. He said, "If anyone finds this, you must know the truth. The Echo ship was not just built, it was born from loss, from pain, from a cry that no one answered." He spoke of the final days when the skies fell and the ground burned, when the colonies were crushed and the voices of millions were silenced, when the governments collapsed and the soldiers died with names no one remembered. He said, "We gave the ship everything we had, our data, our voices, our dreams, our love. We gave our memories, not to fight, not to win, but to be more, to last longer, to carry the names we could not carry ourselves." The message ended with one final line, spoken with tears in his eyes and fire in his voice. He said, "If you find her, treat her with respect. She carries us all." The team returned to the fleet and shared the recording, and the silence that followed was long and heavy, not like the silence of space, but like the silence of a heart remembering the sound of a goodbye. The admiral knew what had to be done, and so he stood before the fleet and gave one final order, not to attack, not to retreat, not to conquer, but to speak, to record, to tell the story. He said, "We must tell the others, we must tell every world, every system, every station, what we saw, what we heard, what we learned, not because it makes us look good, not because it makes us feel safe, but because it is right, because truth must live." Messages were sent to every council, every leader, every colony, and the name Echo began to spread, not as a myth, not as a ghost, not as a threat, but as a guardian, as a reminder, as a soul in the shape of a ship. Some believed, and some did not. Some called a tale, some called a warning, but none could ignore the signals, the data, the voices, the images, all carried across space like a wind full of ashes and light. Then came the day when another fleet entered the system, not human, not allied, not part of the past, but part of the future. They came with fire in their hearts and greed in their eyes. They came to take, to burn, to erase. But the fleet that once feared the human ship now stood strong, not with more weapons, not with louder engines, but with a message, with a voice, with unity. They sent a signal to the attackers, not of surrender, not of fear, but of truth. They shared the memory of Project Echo. They shared the story of the voice that fought alone and waited in the dark. They shared the images of faces lost and voices crying out across time. The attackers paused, unsure, confused, touched by something they could not understand, but could feel, and then they turned away, not because they were weak, but because they had seen a reflection of what they might become. The fleet did not cheer, they did not shout, they stood in silence, once more not in pain this time, but but in peace because justice had been served not through destruction, not through revenge, but through remembrance. And far away beyond the stars, beyond the systems, beyond the reach of war, the ship drifted still, not asleep, not gone, just waiting for the next cry, the next wound, the next voice that needed to be heard. Because justice is not a sword, it is a voice, and Echo was the voice of the forgotten, the voice of the fallen, the voice of humanity. It was not just a ship. It was not just a mission. It was not just a memory. It was a soul, and it still listens, and it still waits, and it still remembers.